All right, so today we are going like super deep on something pretty basic, how to take care of the body.
Mm-mm.
We all have one, right?
Yeah, we do.
Well, you sent over this chapter called How to Take Care of the Body. It's from a book called Pure Consciousness, Taking on the Way Inside. There's some really interesting stuff in there.
Yeah, what's so interesting is it's not typical health and fitness advice, like the author isn't like a doctor or a personal trainer or anything like that.
Right.
But they bring this really insightful perspective to it just based on logic and personal experience.
Yeah, it's like the philosophy of the body. And what's so funny is they start off talking about something I think we can all relate to, especially as we get older, just neglecting the body.
Oh, yeah.
It's so easy to take our physical well-being for granted.
Absolutely. We get caught up in the daily grind.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden our bodies are like, hey, remember us? Like,
Right.
stiff back here, twinge in the knee there.
Yeah, and you're like, wait, when did this happen? Like, we just think our bodies are going to keep running smoothly without any maintenance.
Yeah, totally.
And then the author asks this question that I thought was really, really interesting. Is the human body actually designed for stillness?
Right. Think about it. We
Yeah.
spend hours sitting at desks, staring at screens, barely moving. Our modern lifestyle is totally different from,
Right.
how our ancestors lived.
Totally.
They were constantly on the move.
So we're giving our bodies a ton of stillness,
Yeah.
maybe more than they were built for, but isn't some level of stillness also necessary for rest and recovery?
Mm-hmm.
So how do we reconcile those two things?
That's a great question. And the author addresses it by getting really specific about how our bodies work.
Okay.
They talk about the skeletal system, for example.
Oh,
Most of us only think about our bones when something goes wrong, like you fracture something or you break something.
out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the author argues that our skeletal structure is actually key to our overall well-being. They talk about how our posture, the way we hold our skeletons, can gradually distort over time.
Okay, now you've got my attention. So tell me more about these postural distortions.
Yeah.
What are they and how do they happen?
So imagine your spine like a stack of building blocks.
Okay.
If those blocks aren't aligned properly, the whole structure becomes unstable.
Okay.
That's essentially what happens with postural distortions.
So is it like slouching?
Slouching is definitely a contributor,
Okay.
but it's more nuanced than that. The author talks about how prolonged sitting, repetitive movements, even the way we carry our bags,
Right.
can contribute to these really subtle shifts in our skeletal alignment.
And what's the impact of those shifts?
Yeah.
Besides maybe looking a little less than graceful.
Well, it's not just about aesthetics.
Oh.
When our posture is off, certain muscles become shortened and tight,
Right.
while others become overstretched and weak.
Okay.
And this imbalance can lead to all sorts of problems, back pain, neck pain, headaches, you name it.
Wow. That's making me very aware of how I'm sitting right now.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Most of us, when we experience those aches and pains,
Mm-hmm.
we go to the doctor, we get a prescription, maybe we do some physical therapy, we're treating the symptoms.
Right.
But the author seems to be suggesting that's not enough.
You hit the nail on the head. The author's aha moment is that instead of just addressing the muscle pain, we need to correct the underlying postural issues.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Yeah.
It sounds like it's more than just standing up straight every now and then.
It's definitely a process. And the author delves into some specific strategies later on in the chapter.
Okay.
But one of the key takeaways is that we need to become more aware of how we're holding our bodies throughout the day.
So it's about bringing that mindfulness into our everyday movements.
Exactly.
Interesting. But we can't be mindful all the time.
Right.
Right. We still need to actually move our bodies.
Yes.
Which brings us to exercise. And I have to say the author has some pretty surprising things to say about how we should be approaching our workouts.
Oh, yeah. You always hear that all exercise is good.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But the author throws down a little bit of a challenge to that conventional wisdom. They argue that it's not just about moving your body, it's about where your attention is focused while you're moving.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
So like it matters what I'm thinking about while I'm on the treadmill.
Exactly. Think about it this way. When you're playing a sport like tennis or soccer,
Uh-huh.
your focus is external. You're focused on the ball.
Right.
Your opponent threw the strategy of the game.
Right.
Same with a lot of gym workouts,
Right.
You're counting reps, checking your form in the mirror, maybe thinking about what you're going to have for dinner later.
Okay. I'm totally guilty of that. My mind wanders all over the place when I'm working out.
Yeah,
But what's the alternative?
right.
What does the author suggest we focus on instead?
The author proposes that we shift our attention inward to the sensations of our bodies as we move. They use examples like swimming or running,
Uh-huh.
where you can really tune into the rhythm of your breath, the feeling of your muscles engaging the flow of your movements.
That's a really fascinating perspective.
Mm.
I never thought about exercise that way before. But does the author think that certain exercises are better for cultivating this internal focus than others?
Mm.
Or is it more about the mindset you bring to any activity?
It's definitely a bit of both.
Okay.
The author points out that some activities lend themselves more naturally to an internal focus,
Right.
but the key is to consciously cultivate that awareness no matter what you're doing.
So it's not about ditching the gym altogether.
Right.
It's about becoming more mindful of how we're moving,
Exactly.
even when we're lifting weights or doing a Zumba class. But why is this inward focus so important?
Yeah.
What are the benefits?
Well, the author argues that there are two major advantages to exercising with an internal focus.
Okay.
First, it can actually improve your technique and performance because you're more attuned to your body's feedback.
Right.
And second, it can help prevent injuries.
Okay, I see how that makes sense. If you're
Mm-hmm.
really paying attention to how your body feels, you're less likely to push yourself too hard
Yeah,
or use improper form. It's like
Mhm.
you're becoming your own personal trainer in a way.
exactly. And this all ties into the mind-body connection that the author emphasizes throughout the chapter.
You mean the idea that our physical and mental states are intertwined?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to hear more about how the author explores that connection,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the context of exercise. It feels like we've just scratched the surface here.
You're right. We've only just touched on this whole mind-body connection. What the author found was that physical movement, especially with that inward focus we were talking about, can actually quiet the mental chatter that we all experience. Have you ever noticed that?
Yeah, actually, when I'm swimming laps, I definitely notice that my to-do list kind of fades into the background.
Yeah.
There's something about the rhythm of the strokes, the focus on my breath. It's almost meditative.
Exactly. It's like movement, especially when we're really tuned into our bodies. It creates this space for the mind to settle.
Right.
And that leads the author to this really interesting question. Could taking care of the body actually be a pathway to mental stillness?
Whoa. Okay, that's a totally different way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Usually we think about, meditation or mindfulness practices as the path to inner peace.
Yeah.
But the author's suggesting that physical care can play a role too.
It's a really interesting perspective shift.
Yeah.
And it connects back to the author's overall philosophy of approaching the body with this sense of awareness and respect.
So it's not just about pushing our bodies to their limits or trying to achieve some external ideal of fitness.
Yeah.
It's about cultivating a deeper connection with our physical selves
Yeah.
and understanding how that connection impacts our mental and emotional well-being.
Precisely. And the author actually takes this idea even further by exploring how our worldview, how we see and interpret the world around us can actually influence our physical well-being.
Okay, now that sounds interesting. What's the connection between our bodies and how we see the world?
Well, remember how we were talking about neglecting our bodies?
Yeah.
The author suggests that this neglect is often tied to a mindset that prioritizes external achievements and validation over our internal well-being.
So like we're so focused on climbing the career ladder, getting that promotion,
Right.
achieving success in the eyes of others,
Yeah.
that we forget to tune in to what our bodies are actually needing.
We push ourselves too hard. We ignore those early warning signs of pain or fatigue. And over time, that can really take a toll on both our physical and mental health.
This is making me think about all those times I've powered through a workout, even though my body was screaming for a break.
Yeah.
Or those late nights I've pulled to finish a project, sacrificing sleep and self-care in the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I was so focused on the end goal that I completely disconnected from what my body was trying to tell me.
And that's where the author's concept of complete trust in reality comes in. It's about recognizing that our bodies are part of that reality,
Okay.
and they have their own wisdom to share if we're willing to listen.
Okay. I'm intrigued, but also a little confused. What exactly does the author mean by complete trust in reality?
Yeah,
It sounds kind of abstract.
I hear you. It's definitely a big idea. But think of it like this. It's about accepting what is both the good and the bad and recognizing that even challenging experiences have a purpose.
So instead of resisting or denying those experiences, we try to understand what they can teach us about ourselves and the world around us.
Exactly. And this applies to how we care for our bodies, too.
Yeah.
When we experience pain or illness, instead of seeing it as a personal failing or something to be feared, we can approach it with curiosity, like,
Wow.
what is this sensation telling me?
Right.
What can I learn from this experience?
That's a really different way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's almost like shifting from a victim mentality to a more empowered perspective.
Yeah.
Instead of, why me? It becomes, what now?
I love that. And that ties back to the chapter's theme of taking a more conscious and intentional approach to our well-being.
It's like taking ownership of our health
Yeah.
rather than feeling like it's something that's happening to us.
Exactly. And, the author takes this idea even further by exploring the concept of the human body as a living link to ancient life.
Okay, you're going to have to elaborate on that one. A living link to ancient life. What does that even mean?
Well, remember how we were talking about the skeletal system?
Yeah.
The author points out that our bones and joints aren't just structural elements, they're a testament to millions of years of evolution.
So our bodies carry the legacy of all the creatures that came before us.
Right.
That's kind of poetic when you think about it.
It is. The author argues that this connection goes beyond just physical similarities. There's a kind of wisdom encoded in our very cells, a blueprint for survival and adaptation that's been passed down through countless generations.
Wow, that gives me chills. It's like we're walking around with an entire evolutionary history inside of us. But how do we access that wisdom? How do we tap into that ancient blueprint?
That's where the author's emphasis on mindfulness and inward focus comes full circle. By paying attention to the subtle sensations of our bodies, by listening to our intuition, we can start to reconnect with that deeper wisdom.
It's like suddenly realizing that we're not just isolated individuals, but part of a vast and interconnected web of life stretching back through time.
And that realization can be incredibly empowering. It can help us approach challenges with more resilience, knowing that we have the collective strength of our ancestors behind us.
It makes that complete trust in reality idea make a little more sense too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe it's easier to trust that things will work out when we recognize that we're not alone in this journey.
Right.
We're part of something much bigger than ourselves.
I think you're onto something there. The author seems to be suggesting that taking care of our bodies is about more than just physical health.
Yeah.
It's about tapping into a deeper sense of connection and purpose.
And maybe, just maybe, it's about rediscovering that ancient wisdom that's been within us all along, just waiting to be awakened. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into how to take care of the body. And we've covered some really mind-blowing ideas,
We have.
like from postural distortions to the mind-body connection to our bodies as living links to ancient life. But I have to admit, it's all feeling a little overwhelming right now.
Yeah.
Like, how do we actually put all of this into practice in our everyday lives?
That's a great point. It's one thing to intellectually grasp these concepts,
Right.
but it's another thing entirely to actually integrate them into our daily routines.
Exactly. It's like, I totally get that I should be more mindful of my posture
Yep.
and pay attention to my breath, but then life gets in the way and I'm right back to slouching at my desk, stressing over deadlines and forgetting to take care of myself.
Well, the author seems to anticipate that struggle.
Okay.
They dedicate a whole section of the chapter to practical tips for incorporating these principles into our lives, even when things get busy.
Okay, give us the goods. What kind of practical advice does the author offer?
One of the simplest yet most profound suggestions is to start by paying attention to your breath.
Okay.
And you might be thinking, seriously, breathing. I do that all the time without even thinking about it.
Right. It seems so basic.
It is basic, but that's the beauty of it.
Okay.
The author points out that most of us breathe very shallowly, especially when we're stressed or anxious.
Right.
So by consciously deepening your breath, even just for a few minutes each day, you can actually calm your nervous system and create a sense of spaciousness within your body.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like hitting the reset button on your internal state. Are there other simple things we can do to bring more awareness to our bodies?
Absolutely. The author also emphasizes the importance of regular movement, even if it's just for a few minutes each day.
Okay.
We've already talked about how crucial movement is for maintaining skeletal health and preventing those postural distortions, but it also has huge benefits for our mental and emotional well-being.
I hear you on that, but does it have to be a full-blown workout every time?
Yeah,
Sometimes the thought of going to the gym or even going for a run just feels like too much.
I get it. The good news is it doesn't have to be anything strenuous.
Ah.
The author suggests simple activities like walking, stretching, or even just standing up and moving around every hour or so if you have a desk job.
You know, those are all things I can actually commit to.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get so caught up in work that I literally sit for hours without even realizing it.
We've all been there, and that's exactly why these little reminders to move our bodies are so important.
Right.
They help us break those patterns of stillness and reconnect with our physical selves.
It's like those little pings on my smartwatch that remind me to stand up.
Re-
I used to ignore them, but now I see them as a helpful nudge to get my body moving.
And those little nudges can make a big difference over time. Another key point the author makes is that taking care of the body isn't a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
It's about finding what works best for you and honoring your individual needs.
So ditch the restrictive diets and the grueling workout routines that make you miserable.
Exactly. It's about listening to your body's wisdom and finding sustainable practices that nourish you physically and mentally.
That feels so much more empowering than the constant pressure to conform to some external ideal of health and fitness. But is there anything else we can do to cultivate this deeper connection with our bodies?
The author suggests exploring ancient practices like yoga or Tai Chi. They've been passed down through generations and are designed to harmonize the body and mind.
Right.
They emphasize the importance of finding a practice that resonates with you and making it a regular part of your life.
I've dabbled in yoga before, and I always feel so much more centered and grounded. Afterward, maybe it's time to commit to a regular practice.
I think that's a great idea. And remember, the author reminds us that this is a journey, not a destination.
Right.
There will be days when we fall short of our intentions, and that's okay.
Yeah.
The key is to approach ourselves with compassion and keep coming back to these principles, even if it's just one small step at a time.
That's such a reassuring message. It takes the pressure off of having to be perfect
Yeah,
and allows us to embrace the messy, imperfect reality of being human.
absolutely.
Well, this has been an amazing deep dive.
It has.
I feel so inspired to prioritize taking care of this amazing body that I have. And what's really striking me is how much this chapter reframes our understanding of what it means to be healthy.
Right.
It's not just about looking good or achieving peak performance.
Right.
It's about cultivating a deeper awareness of ourselves as whole beings interconnected with the world around us.
Beautifully said. And as the author reminds us, our bodies are a living link to ancient life,
Right.
carrying within them a wisdom that we can tap into through mindful movement, deep listening, and a willingness to embrace the incredible mystery of our physical existence.
This deep dive has certainly given us a lot to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this journey of exploring how to care for the body in all its complexity and wonder.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time, keep diving deep.